Good morning and welcome to this online service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington. My name is Lila Herndon Vizzard, and I currently serve on UUCA's Board of Trustees. Ours is a community of many genders and sexualities, a community of diverse cultural and racial and class backgrounds, a community of varied abilities and gifts. Some here find inspiration in the great books, others in the great outdoors, and others still in great conversation. Whoever you may be, we welcome you to bring your whole self into this community. Happy March, everyone! This month, as spring approaches, we are taking time to reflect and engage on the theme of commitment. I hope that this exploration will show each of us how we might better commit or recommit to supporting one another and our beloved community, and to remind us of the importance of committing to our own self-care and our spiritual and physical health. I also invite you to join us after the service for our virtual coffee hour so that we can get to know you better and spend some time with one another. So, take a deep breath and let us come together as a community in worship.
Good morning. As I was preparing for today's call to worship, I was emailing with Reverend Amanda, and she made a really interesting observation, which is that our previous board meeting, we were doing a check-in that was asking people about commitment and what they were committing to. And many people said that they were committing to less or committing to less. And this got me thinking about the idea of making life simpler. And there's lots of readings on that topic. But I also came across a quote that urged us to consider the full complexity of life. And both of those perspectives really spoke to me, despite their apparent contradictory nature. So I'm going to share two quotes with you, one focused on making life more simple and one about embracing life's complexity. And I hope that these two quotes inspire you to think about what type of commitments are right for you right now. So the first quote is from Kilroy J. Oldster, and it reads, "A person who knows who they are lives a simple life by eliminating from their orbit anything that does not align with his or her overriding purpose and values." The second quote is by M. Scott Peck, and it reads, "Abandon the urge to simplify everything, to look for formulas and easy answers, and to begin to think multidimensionally, to glory in the mystery and paradoxes of life, not to be dismayed by the multitude of causes and consequences that are inherent in each experience, to appreciate the fact that life is complex." Good morning. I hope you'll join Pixie and myself as we light this morning's little baby chalice. We gather together as a community of memory and hope. We light this chalice as a symbol of the light within every human heart. May our individual sparks meet and merge, bringing both light and warmth to the world.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for its soul, for the children of our children, Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned. Circle for release. Circle for the planet. Circle for its soul. For the children of our children. Keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom. Circle round for peace. For all of us imprisoned. Circle for release. Circle for the planet. Circle for its soul. For the children of our children. Keep the circle whole.
Good morning, friends. I would like to tell you a story about a friend of mine named Rita, and something that happened to her which wasn't what she wanted, but came to be something that she really treasured. It was the day that the jobs were handed out to all of the students in the classroom, and it was the most exciting day of the year for those students. It took place at the first week of their term. This day, every child was given a different job which they would be responsible for the whole school year. Now, there were a lot of jobs that were interesting for some of the kids. Some of the kids really liked being the one who would report on the weather for the day. Some kids liked leading the Pledge of Allegiance. Some kids liked bringing in all of the books from the library book cart. Other jobs were less interesting, like cleaning the whiteboard or passing out hand sanitizer. But this was the day that a lot of the kids who worked so hard to be so responsible the year before were really excited because they usually got the better jobs. And my friend Rita was the most excited of all. She worked so hard last year to be so responsible and so good and help out everyone in her classroom. And she was looking forward to taking care of the class pet, Charlie the gecko. So when it came time to divvy up all of the jobs, the teacher picked out the children one by one and called out to them, letting them know what their jobs were. And when it came time for Rita, teacher called her up to the front of the class and presented her with a tiny box. And Rita was confused. The gecko was much bigger than the box. And when she opened it up, she saw a little bit of sand and a tiny ant crawling around in it. The teacher told her that it would be her responsibility to take care of this ant for the entire year. Rita was very disappointed. She looked forward to feeding Charlie the gecko, and now she had to take care of this silly little ant. She went home that night with her aunt and spoke to her mom and dad and told them how disappointed that she was. And her dad said, well, maybe in protest, you ought to just not take care of that ant. Focus on something else. Rita didn't like that idea very much. She decided that maybe it was best to take care of the ant, even though the teacher disappointed her, that it wasn't fair. In fact, Rita decided that she was going to take care of the ant and be the best ant caretaker that anyone had ever seen. So Rita started studying up on ants and their habitats. Rita realized that one ant on its own wouldn't survive. She found other ants and built a little ant colony in her house in a box, and she found a way to take care of them, give them the absolutely best food they could have, and the whole ant colony thrived. At the end of the year, there was a very special guest who came to Rita's classroom. It was a woman who looked very important, and her name was Dr. Martinez. She had come to tell the school, and Rita's class especially, about some wonderful news. Dr. Martinez studied insects in the rainforest, and she had sent each class an ant in all of the different schools all over Rita's city. And whoever took care of their ant the best, their class would get to go on an extended field trip to an actual Amazon rainforest to see all of the different insects there. And all of the students were so excited and so happy that they got to go on this trip. And Rita felt really, really proud of herself, because she took something that she initially didn't like and was able to turn it into something great. One of the things I love about this story, friends, is that sometimes we're handed a task, and sometimes we wonder why we get this task and why we have to do it. Rita didn't really fully understand why she didn't get take care of Charlie the gecko and why she had to take care of an ant. But when she asked herself the big question, she decided that ant was worth taking care of, that every creature is worth a little love, and she put her heart and soul to it. She found the yes in a bad situation, and she made the absolute best of it. And I think it's great because so often we're handed situations where we don't want to do what's asked of us. Sometimes we feel a whole great big grumpy no in that action. And sometimes if we try really hard, we can find something in there to say yes to that makes the action worthwhile. I'd like to think that Rita would have loved taking care of those ants, whether or not their whole class got to go to the Amazon rainforest. I'd like to think that she found joy in feeding and caring and creating that ant colony. And I hope that you can find the joy in the little things that are hard to do, that are difficult for you to motivate yourself to do, to find the reasons why and to say, yes, I can love that. I want you all to take care of yourselves, take care of those you love. Say I love you to your friends, to your family, and know that in turn that you are loved. Be well.
Friends, during our prayer and meditation time this morning, I want to instead do a little math with you. I want to teach you about triangle breathing. Now, you can also do square breathing, which is great, but Triangle breathing is the one that I turn to when I'm feeling stressed and need to calm down. My sense is that this is a time of a lot of stress for folks. That as the end of the tunnel is perhaps just visible, we also are feeling the anxiety of new choices, the length of time that we have been in quarantine, the hope and worry about being together again. So it seemed like a good time for triangle breathing. It's easy. Just breathe in on, say, a count of 4. Hold your breath for that count of 4. Breathe out on a count of 4 and start it over again. You can use a count of 3, a count of 6, whatever feels right for your body. And you can do it anytime you want. When you feel stressed or worried, when you want to be centered before something important happens, whenever you have a need to feel more present, more grounded. I invite you now, right this moment with me, to try a little triangle breathing. Close your eyes if you'd like, or soften your gaze. And let's begin. We'll do 4 rounds. Triangle breathing or any other breathing or mindfulness technique is always here for you. We are here for you too. If you'd like to reach out and talk with someone on the ministerial team or a lay pastoral care associate, you can find us at pastoralcare@uucava.org or by calling the congregation's phone number and choosing extension 5. You can share now in the chat how you're doing. Check in with each other. You can reach out. You can take a breath. We hope to see you soon. And I hope all of us remember to breathe. I read once that to know your real priorities, you have to look at your calendar and see what fills up your actual day. Apparently, my highest values at the moment are finding a Zoom link for that meeting that I have scheduled. Our time right now, our days, our calendars are wonky. Some of us have too few things on them. Some of us have too many things. Some of us have too many things that happen simultaneously, like childcare and work somehow. Many of us have just not the right things, not the ones we want to have on our calendar. And yet we are still thinking, even in this unusual time, about our time, about the choices we make about how to use it, how to spend it, how to waste it or luxuriate in it, about the commitments that we make with our calendar. We are exploring the theme of commitment this month. And I think we often imagine that word and think about relationships. And next week, indeed, our intern minister, Laura, will explore what it means to be committed to a relationship over the long haul, looking particularly at friendships in our lives, big, important friendships. But whether in relationships or work or family, it is true, I believe, that how we really live out our commitments shows up in our time. One of the things that has been interesting to me as I've talked with some of you over the last few months is hearing that on occasion, people are able to articulate that this pandemic has given them new and welcome awareness about their time. Families have talked about how, with the disappearance of traveling teams and many of the regular activities that they schlep kids around to, they are rethinking what it means to be so scheduled, what it means to have expanses of time. People are noticing the seasons more. Sometimes they're settling into a different rhythm. And of course, sometimes we are just wondering how on earth it has been a year already, or how it has been only a year, and taking stock of what that year has meant to us. Taking stock, I think, might be a good idea for all of us anytime as we look at our calendars and think about our commitments. So I wanted to offer today a little guide to taking stock of our commitments, maybe even a little guide to commitment in general. I think of it this way, sort of when to say yes, how to say no, what to do about the things we feel like are really just our duty, and how to manage when we fail at our commitments despite our best intentions. That's what I'm hoping we'll cover, at least. Let's start with how to say yes, or when to say yes. One of the things I think about a lot is how to figure out what I really hope fills up my calendar. Of all the things I could be doing, all the justice work that calls to me perhaps, or all the fun things I might be doing, all the ways I could connect, all the books I could read, how do I know what to say yes to? How do I figure out a way to live my life so that I am propelled by joy, even maybe especially in my political work, in my justice work? The author and facilitator Adrienne Maree Brown wrote about this in her book, Pleasure Activism. Pleasure Activism is a book about being led by and honoring pleasure, personally and politically. And all through the book, though she looks at various different aspects of our lives, all through the book, Brown uses language that we most often associate with erotic pleasure. But she's talking here not about the erotic, but about the embodied, the felt in the broadest and deepest sense. She writes this: I began to move toward my own yes. I examined how my experiences of deep political alignment with people who wanted to collaborate had taught me more than years of battling with people who wanted to dominate me or compete against me. I began to make decisions about whether I wanted to do things in my life and in the movements I am part of by checking for my orgasmic yes, and to feel for resistance inside that small place in my gut that knows before I do that something is not a fit for me and will not increase my aliveness. As I facilitate these movements for social and environmental transformation with a focus on Black liberation, brown rights, I always prioritize how people feel. Is it a pleasure to be with each other? Does the agenda or space allow for aliveness, connection, and joy? Is there a yes at the center of the work? I love the way Brown invites us into this yes space, into the joy at the center. And I can resonate with it. The feeling I get when I'm doing something because I feel like I'm supposed to, and the feeling I get when I'm doing something because it gives me life. It makes me feel more alive to be engaged with it. I have a yes to that work. It feels relevant, actually, to me as a white person doing anti-racism work, to focus not just on the work of it, not just the duty of it, my job to do because of my privilege, but also the joy of it, the freeness of it. Like, we all need to get free from white supremacy, white people included. And the liberation that we will feel on the other side is beautiful, it's rich, a community where there's space for all people. I want to note my indebtedness to some of the folks from UUCA who attended the New Day Rising conference about a week and a half ago, and who have been having conversations since then, helping me to continue my own thinking about what it really means to feel joy in our work, to do it because of the richness and the freedom on the other side. So we know we want to make choices that bring with them a significant yes feeling. Yes, I want to be here. I want to sign up for this. I want to spend my time and fill my calendar with this work. How do we get there? I think it actually begins with increasing our capacity to say no, with being honest with ourselves about what we can and can't do, getting comfortable about what does not bring the feeling of joy or what simply doesn't fit into our calendar, what makes it so that our yes to something else would be so diluted as to be meaningless. That is a hard one. I was at another meeting at UUCA recently where, as the go-round, we were invited to share what we were making commitments to this spring. What did we feel moved to commit to? It was notable that 90% of the people around that circle said some version of, I want to commit to committing to less. They knew, right, that there was a need for them to say no to things because they wanted to say that big yes. They wanted to be able to say yes and mean it. So how do we grow that skill, the no skill? Saying no, especially to things that we care about or to people that we care about, can be difficult for us. And I think it is especially hard for those of us who are socialized as women. It's one of about 1 million reasons why it's so important to teach children about consent from an early age, to teach them that they are in charge of their own bodies and who touches them, and that over time they get to figure out how to be in charge of their own time as well, what they say no and yes to fill up their lives. Any parent of a middle schooler can tell you that it is a growth opportunity for kids to figure out how to say no to some things in their calendar so that they have time to say yes to other things say, for instance, homework. Oh, wait, I may be that parent. So teaching our children these skills and figuring out these skills ourselves, I think fundamentally are about building our capacity to set up boundaries. Ed Friedman, the systems theory teacher and writer who I've surely quoted before, talks about boundaries this way. He says self-differentiation, having clear boundaries, is knowing where you end and I begin, or where I end and you begin, knowing that we're separate individuals. Prentice Hemphill, who is the teacher and coach and the founder and director of the Black Embodiment Initiative, puts it this way: boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. The distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. I had a great conversation about a week ago in a family systems class that I was teaching at UUCA. Someone raised the question about to what extent are boundaries, the idea of boundaries or what boundaries look like for each of us, culturally bound or culturally influenced. And I thought, yes, right, of course, right? Anyone who has spent time in multiple cultures knows that there are different expectations about how physically close we might be with each other, how much we're expected to be in each other's business emotionally or intellectually, how much we're expected to be involved in each other's lives. I am actually waiting for someone to write a book, or I would settle for a series of essays looking at the intersection and sometimes the tension between family systems work, which I find to be so helpful, and work around power and privilege or around cultural differences, cultural expectations. So if you're watching this and you have the capacity to write that book or that series of essays, let me know. I'm ready to buy it. In the meantime, in our conversation in that class, we came down to something like, well, I think it's internal. Your comfortable boundaries can't be judged from the outside. You can't look at someone and say, oh, yes, they've got their boundaries set just right. But you know internally whether a boundary feels good or not, feels healthy or not, whether it's the right distance for you. So, okay, that aside, or that importantly in the center, maybe boundaries are internal, about creating the distance, setting up around us what we need in order to say no when we want to say no, so that we can say yes when we want to say yes, right? I had one coach tell me that it was about being selfish in a good way, setting up those boundaries. Jenny Brown, the author of Growing Yourself Up, How to Bring Your Best to All of Life's Relationships, writes, quote, the project of growing ourselves, our task of seeking to understand how we may be contributing to our own dissatisfactions in our interactions, is all about personal responsibility in our relationships and not about self-promotion. So it's about being selfish in terms of thinking about the self, who we are, what's our responsibility, and how can we grow ourself, not being selfish like we're more important than all the other people. Boundaries, I think, start with that figuring out where we end or how we want to love ourselves. So how do we build that capacity? Brown's idea in her book, Growing Yourself Up, is that every stage in our life offers different ways to practice. Often our set point for boundaries, whether they feel healthy or unhealthy, comes from our family of origin. Were your parents able to say no to things that didn't serve them well or that were damaging to them? Did they encourage you or allow you to do that when you were a child or a teen? And that we can work at it over time, often grounded in calming or managing our own anxiety, maybe even using our triangle breath. And that we can create systems, families, communities, or congregations that honor the practice of saying no and believing it, right? I always appreciate when volunteers, if I ask them to do something, give me a thoughtful no, because it means that I can trust that when they say yes to something else, they really mean it. I want to be able to create a culture here, to build on the culture here, that it's okay to say no to something, to say that's not going to serve me or the community right now, because there's something else we want to be able to say yes to. So how do you really do that to grow yourself up, to build your boundaries, your capacity to set boundaries? I asked a couple of colleagues that question. Joanna Fontaine Crawford responded that she thinks it's about understanding that boundaries without consequences aren't boundaries, they're wishes. She went on to say, wishes are all well and good, that's fine, but don't confuse them with boundaries. Evan Carvel-Ziemer offered, it's about starting with deep self-awareness about our needs and capacity, grounding ourselves in truly understanding ourselves, what we can do, what we want and need, and then moving from there. Okay, so part of commitment is learning to really understand and create our no's, to set our boundaries and to hold them, so that we can say the embodied yes. But let's be honest, right? Some of commitment actually doesn't really feel like a beautiful embodied yes to what makes us feel alive. It might feel more like, if I don't bathe my child, he will smell, or if I don't clean the dishes, I won't have dishes to eat off. And out of that is born a commitment to, I don't know, I guess cleaning things, right? So how do we do that in our lives? How do we fulfill our commitments to the things that aren't making us feel alive, but rather getting us through the daily grind? I actually think it's in the if. If I don't clean the dishes, I won't have dishes. I got some great advice from another coach. It's possible the theme of this sermon is Amanda really likes coaching, which is true. I got some great advice about setting goals for myself. This was in the context of setting professional goals. Make sure when I set a goal that there's a so that attached. Like, why am I setting that goal? I'm not just, for instance, building my skills for recorded worship for no apparent reason. I'm building my skills for recorded worship so that I can connect better with the people that I serve. The reason behind the commitment, whether it's connecting with other people or having dishes to eat off, elevates the duty, the commitment that maybe doesn't itself make us feel fully alive and embodied in the world. It elevates it into the yes category. Yes, I am committed to this thing because there's a so that I really want to say yes to. So, what happens when we mess up and can't keep a commitment? Because, spoiler alert, we are human and that happens all the time. I turn back inward at these moments. And I think in particular about the acronym RAIN, R-A-I-N, first coined by Michelle McDonald, but perhaps familiar to you through the work of Tara Brach, who uses it regularly. Shortened, RAIN, which is essentially a tool for self-compassion, and one we particularly need when we are feeling bad about ourselves, when we've messed up. RAIN stands for recognize the feeling. Allow it to be there, A. I investigate with kindness. What's happening with that feeling? What does it look like and feel like in our bodies, in our hearts? And then cultivate a natural awareness, not identifying with the experience, just aware of it. That last one feels both the hardest and the most important. I think it's about acknowledging the mistake without letting it totally define us. It exists, that mistake. We made it. Whoops. And it's not the sum total of our selfhood, which means we can move on and try again. That feels super important for everything. Relationships, moving past challenges and failures, both acknowledging our responsibility for them and not allowing them to define us. It feels important for our anti-oppression work, particularly for those of us with privilege who might make a mistake and need to notice it, investigate it, right? Allow it to be, and also move forward without letting it fully define us, because the moving forward is the important part. And it feels important for getting to our yeses, the big alive ones, the ones we want to commit ourselves to. Allowing ourselves to understand that we deserve to feel joyful yeses to things, even though we are people who sometimes, maybe often, fail. And using those failures as growing experiences to get to clearer no's, which lead to the more embodied yeses. It's all coming together. So there you go. My easy guide to commitment. Easy to say anyway. You want to be able to say a big yes. And your big yes can only exist if you're clear on your no's. Your no's can grow from a place of self-awareness and honesty. Sometimes you have to do things that feel like duty, but beneath the duty, there's a commitment to something bigger. And your failures help you figure out where the no's should probably be, which brings us back to the big yes. And that is what we ultimately want. A calendar filled with big yeses. We, all of us, are going to have some choices coming up, personally in our own lives and for the congregation as a whole. Choices as we begin to imagine the return to some kind of hybrid, different, new normal life together. And we're going to need to figure out personally and as a congregation as a whole where the no's are, as well as where the big yeses are. And what it means for us to make our big yes commitments to the joy we want in our lives, to the beauty we seek to create in our community, to our mission in the world. That is a lot of calendar to fill. The yeses are only going to get there when we figure out the no's. And I hope and believe that we are going to come through the failures and the figuring out and the honesty and self-awareness, that we are all, individually and collectively, going to be able to say yes to a whole lot of beauty and justice in the world. May it be so.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
For the next 4 Sundays, the UUCA offering will be shared with those most in need in the Buckingham community. 70% of your donations made over the next month will be used to purchase grocery gift cards to be distributed in collaboration with the Resident Services Manager and the Arlington County Community Outreach Specialist. Both of these offices are on site and have intimate knowledge of the residents' needs, so we know that they will be served well.
Love is the greatest gift of all. Love that helps guide our boundaries, our no's, that spurs on our yeses, that moves us closer to feeling connected and alive and one with the world. May you find that love, that big yes you hope to give this week. May it be so. Amen.
We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the birds, they tell us. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the trees, they tell us. We're here to be lifted in love, to listen to love as a flower raises its face to the sun. We are all one, here to be lifted in grace and love. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the sky, it tells us. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the tree.